With an honours degree in estate management and graduation from the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, Andrew has a 25-year career with the British Army. He joined Southern Cross Care, South Australia Northern Territory, in 2011 as their CEO. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Andrew.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction. A couple of things that I might add to it. I'm a POM, but I don't whinge. I'm very proud to be a POM, and I love being on the losing side. And it says something. I'm going to talk about the Commonwealth. I think that's something about how the Commonwealth hangs together. The POMs teach the rest of the world how to play games and then consistently lose to them. And that's how we hold the thing together. But the other thing I'd like to say is I'm also a bit of a nomad, as we've heard before. I love travel. I love studying what goes on in other countries. And it was spending a fortnight on an amazing SAGE tour in South Africa last October. And I'm delighted to see Judy's here, who led us valiantly across South Africa, studying aged care in that country. And on the bus, in the back of the bus, was Jim Hazel and Chris Baines. And Chris, that's, I think, part of the reason why I'm here. And it certainly says something about the power of networking in the back of a bus. The other thing that you didn't hear about me is I'm proud to be and was invited to become the chair. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I'm really pleased to do it, to take the chair of a thing called Dignity in Care Australia. That's a whole other story, which I'm not going to talk about, but happy to discuss it later if anyone wants to. What I'm going to do is take you on a very swift international tour of three topics. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Southern Cross Care, just to position the context. But then I wanted to talk about three things, really. I want to take you back to South Australia and talk about the South Australian Innovation Hub, which is a new grouping and partnership, not-for-profit and for-profit providers, looking at how we can assist the government in the whole red tape reduction agenda. I then want to take you back to the UK and talk about this partnership that we did between a not-for-profit and for-profit providers in the UK, the biggest retirement developer and one of a large not-for-profit care operator, and how that's gone. And then I want to talk to you a bit about Common Age, which is the new organisation on the block, and I'm hoping to enlist the support of some of you in helping us to move that forward. So quite quickly, because I know we're pressed for time, the facts about Southern Cross Care. It is part of a federation. We are part of a grouping across the country. If you were to put us all together and count up the numbers of retirement village units that have been developed by the national organisation over the last year, we would have been somewhere way up towards the upper middle of Chris's list that he showed us earlier. But we are a loose federation. We're trying to get it tighter, but we owe our allegiance to the founding fathers, the Knights of the Southern Cross, a Catholic order of laymen, set up Southern Cross Care, Southern Cross Homes as it then was, back in the 1960s, and we have been growing and building services for older people across Australia since. And some of the villages that were set up by Southern Cross Care in South Australia particularly were built in the 1970s. They're still going strong, and in many cases still got the same residents living in them. So there's something about longevity in that space. But we're quite a large organisation in South Australia with nearly 2,500 staff, and proudly I'm able to say that some 500 of those any money. They come to work because they believe in the organisation and they are volunteers. And the organisation started as a volunteer organisation, and gradually, obviously, we have employed, but still we have many, many volunteers who keep our organisation going, and some of them are regular people who come up to receive long service awards for 30, 35, 40 years of service to their communities. So it's an organisation that I am immensely proud temporarily to be part of. I came out here 3.5 years ago. I'm proud owner of a 457 visa. I'm not sure whether it's going to be extended. I hope it might, to allow me to complete my time here. Quite a big organisation with residential care, retirement living and community services, and increasingly trying to blend those three services into one. I could talk for ages about it, but I'm not going to. I'm going to move straight on to talk about the Innovation Hub. This was an initiative which came about through discussion. Really, I think my colleague Mike Runge from ACH Group and Minister Andrews, shortly after this government was elected, they wanted to find groups across the country who could look at innovation in best practice, innovation in ways in which the regulatory burden could be reduced. So this is what the Minister said when he launched the trial. It's a 2-year trial about the Innovation Hub. He used more words than we do. We use words like this, that is what we're doing. We're working together to improve and sustain better outcomes for older Australians. There are 10 organisations in the hub, but mainly for not-for-profits, and that, I suppose, says something about a very strong collegiate atmosphere amongst the not-for-profit providers in South Australia, but we have for-profit organisations with us as well. We were chosen by the government as organisations that had got an established pattern of working together, but also a reputation for decent quality. So we had to jump through a number of hoops in order to be there, and we had to prove that we were squeaky clean in terms of accreditation backgrounds, in terms of ACFI validation, in terms of complaints history, and so on. But when we were then selected and we were launched last year, we've now started on an agenda of progress. But we base it on this principle that the government has really established of earned autonomy. If we can prove that we are on top of our game, that we are responsible for our own quality, that we are adequately governed, and that we are taking proper responsibility for risk, then the government wants to give more trust. And that's really what it's about. But these are some of the projects that we're doing. Consumer engagement, governance. We're spending a lot of time exploring the different patterns of governance with board members and CEOs and so on, and looking at the best practice in that area. The accreditation has been probably the most highly visible aspect of it, and those of us that have been recently through the accreditation cycle are now being awarded 5 years of accreditation instead of 3 as a consequence of being part of this trial. We're looking at quality of life, we're looking at complaints handling. The next big subject we're going to tackle is consumer-directed care in residential care, and we are looking alongside our colleagues in ACFA and in other organisations about financial reporting. So there's a lot going on. It's not an easy ride. We are all committing a lot of time and energy to this project, and hopefully it is going to be work that will be of benefit to the wider sector across the country. But the 5-year accreditation is a great thing to get, and I was proud to receive the first 5-year certificate for one of our services back in December. We are now getting fewer ACFI audits. We are being trusted a bit more, but we've still, if we're found wanting in any respect, then the validation police will be over us like a rash. So we have to continue to take control of our own quality and our own performance in that regard. So I don't see 5-year accreditation as by any means a lightening of the burden on the provider. In fact, I think it is the opposite, because it is saying to us we must step up and take responsibility for our own quality. And so that's requiring a lot of work to be done on internal audits, on peer-to-peer audits from one set of management to another, to make sure that we are up to speed. And we are still obviously subject to the unannounced support visits, and those seem to be happening with quite significant frequency at the moment. So maybe we're just being tested a bit. But it is a great initiative. We're proud to be part of it, and hopefully we'll see some good benefits coming out of it. So that's the Innovation Hub. Now I'd like to take you to the UK and talk about this partnership that we did started back in 2010. And what was it about? Some of you may have heard of McCarthy & Stone. They are one of the largest developers of retirement accommodation in the UK. They were set up in the 1980s, and they realized after they'd started building retirement housing across the country that somebody had to manage them. And it was a bit of an afterthought. And so they set up a management company. And that management company was partly owned by the partners of McCarthy & Stone and others, but it was set up really just to do that rather tedious job of management. And the company they set up was called Peveril. And Peveril didn't really deliver. And so a lot of the things that we've heard about from Pam about how you look at customer service and customer support in retirement was just inadequate. And it led to the formation of an organization called Carlex. And if you haven't heard of Carlex and you want a salutary lesson in consumer power, go and have a look at it online, because it is still there very much in the UK. It stands for the Campaign Against Retirement Leasehold Exploitation. Okay, and you can kind of sense that's POM for you, that's whinging POM for you in writ large. But it actually led to placard waving outside Parliament. It led to class actions against the company for failure to deliver the quality that the residents of these villages were paying for. Nevertheless, McCarthy and Stone still ploughed on up their white line. They thought they could keep going, but then they had, luckily, a coming to Jesus moment. They realized that it was not going to work, and so they looked for a way to get back onto a different line. Maybe it was the red line or something in between. Did they have a path-bending leader? Well, I think probably they did. I met him at a conference, and we talked, and they were redesigning their business model at the time. So I was with the Somerset Care Group, as you've heard, a large not-for-profit provider in the southwest of England, and then we did this, what might be called an unlikely match between the two organizations, and we set up a joint venture company, and it's called Your Life Management Services. And it's now managing the sites across the country that are being developed. But these sites are not traditional retirement living sites. These are assisted living sites. So this is very much retirement with care on site provided. So very much a 50-50 partnership, a joint board. No one organization lords it over the other. And a recognition by McCarthy and Stone that they needed to stick to their knitting and do what they did best, which was to build and move on, and then leave in place an organization that was respected and could really deliver that customer service that is so important. And that sense of, and we made a play of it, and it's very strong, and it does resonate, that is a not-for-profit element of the mix. And there's clear from the response of the consumer that this is a mix that they appreciate. So the commercial driver to get them the best quality of accommodation, but then the supportive not-for-profit approach, which is there for them for as long as they need it. So it's gone on and grown, and the developments there are fewer than the numbers you've heard talked about earlier, and they're very much set in the centre of their communities. So McCarthy and Stone have a very clearly defined set of criteria on which they will base a site selection, and it has to be in a market town of a particular demographic where there is sufficient social wealth in order to support the development, but very much these are smaller, so 50 to 60 apartments, right in the centre of town, within walking distance of the supermarkets, of the shops, of the church, of the social resources that people need to support them. So that way the organisation doesn't need to provide them themselves. And the service charge, of course, is the key thing that people is so visible for people. There's not a tradition really of a DMF culture in the UK, and people pay on as they go, and they feel it as they pay it. And so they are very quick to criticise if they don't think they're getting value for money. So Your Life is a registered domiciliary care provider, and it is therefore regulated as such by the Care Quality Commission. So in the 5 years since this began, there has been a rapid development of this product. And so now 38 developments have opened across the United Kingdom. We've gone up into Scotland and not yet into Northern Ireland, but the intention is that there will be up to 70 by 2017. It's a really rapidly growing model, and assisted living, we think, is absolutely the future of what used to be termed low care. So you can see the numbers there. It's quite impressive in terms of from the start of the partnership, and so on it goes. And it's typical. This is a typical development, so it does go up. It is apartment living. It's not broad acre stuff. It is very much in the centre of its community, in that sort of way. But high quality and at a price that works in that particular community. So what does it mean? It means high quality communal facilities. It does mean a restaurant on site, which is obviously an overhead that has to be managed carefully. It does have 24-hour staffing on site, not necessarily by care staff, but with care staff available to come in on a domiciliary basis as and when required. And the model, the important thing in the model is that the owner pays in their service charge from the moment they move into assisted living. They get 1 hour of domestic support in their apartment a week. And they can use that for whatever choice they wish, but it gets people into the mood. If they've not been used to having help in the home, then that 1 hour obviously helps when the escalation needs to happen. I'm just going to race through that. Now I want to bring you to the wider dimension of what we're trying to do in terms of the Commonwealth. This is really an idea that came about. I was lucky enough to be on the board, as you heard, of IASA, the International Association of Homes and Services for the Aging, and I spent 6 years doing that and had the opportunity to travel and to see what went on in a lot of countries. One thing that frustrated me was that when we had meetings and conferences, we would by and large be talking to the developed world. So we would have Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, UK, Europe, and we never managed in that time to really reach out to developing countries, and it was something that I really was burning to do. So when I came off the board in 2012 and I went on a Commonwealth program, which is the program that took me to Mumbai, and saw how some of the developing countries with very little or no aged care infrastructure are struggling and needing to develop these services, it became apparent that there was a great opportunity there based on the 55 countries of the Commonwealth, only half a dozen of which can really be described as developed economies, the rest emerging in various ways. So we approached the Commonwealth Secretariat, and we were supported by the Secretary-General, and we launched Common Age at the AXA conference in Melbourne in November 2013. It was the High Commissioner from South Africa who launched it for us with the help of KPMG and with Margie van Zyl, who is the chairman of IASA, so very strongly linked to IASA. And that's our vision. I'll let you just read that yourselves. But it is about reaching out to those developing countries. Some of them are emerging really quite fast, but they have a huge variety of differences within them. A lot of them have a younger population, and the average age, if you look across the Commonwealth, is actually, across the whole Commonwealth, would you believe, is under 25. But in those emerging countries, they have people who are now living long enough to be called old. And so aging is becoming a challenge for those countries. And we saw some of that in South Africa when we were there last year. So it is really an outreach, and it's something I don't think we could ever have done this from the UK, but it has been amazing to get the support of the Australian aged care community to get behind this. And I'm really grateful for that. It has been a wonderful thing. This is what we've done so far. We've established the business. We've registered it. We had a representative, one of our board members, at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Sri Lanka back in 2013, and he was made hugely welcome. We're building the network. We were at the South Africa Care Forum launch in Stellenbosch back in October last year. And we had our CEO, Klaus Zimmermann, many of you will know him, who was able to participate in an Austrade mission to India back in January this year, where he built a lot of contacts as well. So what are we going to do with this organization? Well, we're going to take it forward in stages. It's a voluntary thing. We're putting a lot of volunteer effort into it at the moment. We hope in due course to be able to raise some money to develop a professional core. But at the moment, we're recruiting members in those developing countries. And here's a plea. If you feel minded to support us, one of the projects that we have for this year, with IASA coming to Perth for their conference in September, is to bring as many people from those developing countries as we can afford to support. So we have set up a scholarship scheme, and I didn't know how this was going to work, but I wrote out to a lot of colleagues and mates in the Australian aged care sector but many of whom are not represented in this room. But I just wrote to people I knew and said, look, will you get behind this? Will you sponsor a delegate? The first organisation to come on board was ECH Group, who I see well represented in the front here. And from a standing start in January, we've now raised over $60,000. And we will be paying a scholarship of $2,500 to each to the delegates from countries like Samoa, from the Solomon Islands. If I can get through to Vanuatu, they're offline at the moment for some reason that I'm not sure about, we'll hope to get someone from there. But from Sri Lanka, from Kenya, from Uganda, from Cameroon, Sierra Leone, some of these countries are doing some amazing things with very little. If we can just help them to come together and build the network, then that is what it is about. So I would invite you to consider joining us. We still need some donations, and I've got pledge forms with me at the back. Do come and see me. There's also a leaflet at the back on the table in the foyer, so if you want to know more about it, please take that. Then the other big excitement for us is that we've been invited to chair a session at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Malta in November on dementia in Commonwealth countries. Or dementia care in Commonwealth countries. So we're very proud to have that, and that from a standing start 2 years ago is quite a feather in our cap. So that's really what I wanted to talk about in my short time, but please come on board, support us if you can. We're going to have a big international party in Perth at the end of August, beginning of September. Thanks very much.